Hey everybody, Red Mage here. Welcome back to the series where I go through different RPG products that I have and give them a quick flip through and review. It's been a while, I know, but it's been a combination of things. It was the end of the school year for me, or nearly the end of the school year for me, so a lot of the really busy part of the year. I got pretty sick. You guys might be able to still hear it. And then there was Easter, and so all of that combined, and it just made it so it was very hard for me to get a good video out or so. But finally, I'm back, and hopefully I'm going to get back into a good routine, especially now that the bulk of my school year has ended. There's just a lot of grading and stuff now to do, and summer's coming up for me, so I'm really excited about that, and I'm also really excited to get back to the channel. This video, I'm going to be going through 3 Shadowdark settings. 3 Shadowdark settings to kind of tide you over until the Western Reaches comes out. And so I think you could have a lot of fun with this. And a nice thing about these 3 settings is that none of them overlap really with the Western Reaches. I mean, so we don't know what the Western Reaches is going to look like yet, but it's very, very different than these 3. We can already tell. Now, 2 of these were sent to me by the creators. This first one is a preview copy. And in fact, well, I'll go through it in a minute, but yeah, as I said, so thank you to the creators of these first 2 who sent them to me to check out if I felt so inclined, and I do feel so inclined. The first one is Aetherdark, and this one is going up on Kickstarter today when this video is released, April 22nd. So you guys should check it out. It looks really cool. Again, I'll flip through it here. This is a sort of Spelljammer-esque Shadowdark setting. It's got great art throughout. The second is Soulblight. This one is much more like it looks kind of like Knock, Zine Questy. It looks kind of like hodgepodge a little bit, like things are kind of, well, you'll see. It's really cool looking. It's a great use of public domain art. It's kind of punky, which isn't my usual preference. I'm not a big fan of the punk look, like we're, how to put it, into the odd and stuff like that. But this does it really well, and I really like the setting here that's being presented. And the last one is Shadowsun, which is a sort of Shadowdark, or not, excuse me, Dark Sun take on Shadowdark, excuse me. Dark Sun take. It's the sort of not Dark Sun setting for Shadowdark that's out there right now. All right, I'll go through each of them. They're all pretty big, so I'm not going to go through all of them in tons of detail. But I want to spend some time with Aetherdark because this one's the one, as I said, that's being kickstarted today. And so I'll put a link below to the Kickstarter where you can check it out. And hopefully you guys will find it interesting and you'll be able to back it. It's a really cool setting, especially again for that Spelljammer, excuse me, Spelljammer kind of vibe. There's some great tables for creation of worlds and things like that. This is the front cover. You get an overview of the kinds of, many of the things you're going to find in this book. The different classes of ships that you can get, along with different stats for the way that they're designed here with hull, speed, movement, size, attack, and crew. Ship modifications, how much they cost, deck upgrades, naval equipment, fuel, ship armor, rams, ballista ammo, bottled ammo, and hurler ammo. Great tables here, and some really cool ideas, as you'll see as they're detailed later in the book. Hope you guys are. I apologize again for my voice. I'm sick still, so it's coming through, and I'm going to try not to cough or sneeze or anything like that. The art is great throughout, really, really good. And there's some NASA public domain images, and they blend really well, I think, with the rest of the book. It has a very cohesive vibe. This book is written by Micah Abresh, I think is how you say his name. I apologize if I'm incorrect there. Okay. Well, here we go. How ships are, how to read the stats for ships, and how to read the stats for each of these things. So AC, ships as regular AC, speed, how they move, movement stat to maneuver. I guess it's maneuver, not movement. But you get the basic overview of the different ship features, right? And how to read the different abbreviations and things throughout the book. How traveling works, how pursuit works, and that's really cool because, there should be good pursuit rules. One of the not so fun things that RPGs often do is if you're chasing someone or someone's chasing you, and I found this to be the case in just so many of them, especially back in 3rd edition and 5th edition D&D. It was like, okay, I run, and then they run after you, and the speeds are both 30 feet per round, and you can dash, so it's like, okay, and so I move and dash, he moves and dashes, I move and dash, he moves and dashes. What do we do to break this up? Because you can just keep running forever until we start making like con checks, I guess, to see who starts to weaken first. That's not fun. You want a good system for pursuit and for chasing and things like that, especially when it comes to ships, because you're going to see a pirate ship in the distance. You're like, oh no, we got to get out of here. So how do we get away? Or hey, we're pirates and we're chasing down a merchantman or something like that. Those are all just the intro pages, and then you get the table of contents here. So you get the crew, and of course it's all hyperlinked, which is great. You get the crew, you get ships, and a huge section on ships. 70 pages, just about 70 pages on ships. Then you get the gameplay modifications for this. You get travel and rules for travel. GM advice for this particular setting, and again, I love that. GM advice, fine if you're going to put it into a game, but make sure that it's about the specific system or adventure that you're putting out there, campaign that you're putting out there. Then that's helpful, and this is what this is about. It's all about this particular kind of game. Spelljammer kinds of games. You get the ether and how ether mechanics work, astral civilization, how magic, physics, and the planes work together. And you get terrain, different kinds of astral terrain, so to speak, the different kinds of ether. And then the different worlds and how to create worlds. And this is so cool. I love this sort of thing. And then you get some sections at the end on enemies, especially Leviathans, which are pretty cool. And then these are the kinds of enemies that you're going to have through the book. And a whole bunch of new creatures for your perusal. All right, so the art, I love it. Super, super cool. So Shadowdark, let's see the setting. Aetherdark can be played in many settings, but it supposes a particular way the universe makes sense, or makes sailing a ship between stars a sensible endeavor. So, you have sailing ships moving between stars and planets. It's Spelljammer. See, this is what I mean, like really cool use of, I think, public domain art here. With the sort of, what would you call that, Art Deco font here at the end. It reminds me of like the 1920s. It's pretty cool. Crew stats and different crew advancements and how your crew levels up. That's really cool too, the idea that your crew levels up. And you get specialists. This reminds me of Skies of Arcadia, where you would have, if you guys ever played Skies of Arcadia, a brilliant game, which was kind of spelljammery, except it was more like sky pirates and floating islands and things like that. But you had sailing ships that were flying through the air. Anyway, you would have ships, and you could have different ships and things like that, and you could upgrade different parts of your ships. But then you could have particular crew members who did special things, and there were like, I forgot how many slots for crew members, but there were 2 different people throughout the world that you could find for that spot, 2 different recruits. And you had to find them through quests or through, obscure places or rescue them from a desert island or whatever. And they were all named characters, and they all had sort of stories associated with them. Some of them were more interesting than others, of course. But they did something special for that particular role. I always thought that was really cool. And you could do something like that here too, right? So you have a generic specialist, like the bosun or the carpenter or the chef. But then you could find particular guys, heroes maybe, who are, this guy is a legendary chef. Maybe he does something special for your ship, right? You could do something like that. And part of if you did like a sort of open sandbox for your Aetherdark campaign, you could have these guys scattered around the world, and as the result of doing particular things or getting particular relics or artifacts or rescuing certain people, then those are your rewards, are new specialists for your ships. I think that's really cool. Crew reputations, which is really, really cool. I like that. Crew events, great piece of art there. Some different weirdos playing cards. I like that. Crew events at port, really cool. I like these sorts of things. Again, not because you're necessarily going to use them, you're just on the table, at the table. You could, certainly, if you're like, I don't know what to do, and you roll. But because these are great ways of developing your game setting beforehand, right? You're like, okay, I know my players are going to be going to this planet, and they're going to be going to this port city in their next adventure. So I'm going to roll 3 times on this table, and that's what's happening there. That's awesome. Different kinds of ships, which you're going to need ships here. Lots of cool ships here. You get the Arcane Jet, the Etherport Tug, Pirate Hunter, Fast Courier, Arcane Battleship. You get Chained Stars, Star Chariot, Crystal Sails, Crystal Sailboat, Explorer's Kakam, the Boat in a Bottle, the Crystal Rigged Frigate, and then you have Divine Towers, Roaring Shrines, Roaring Temples, Incantations, ship's boat, cargo skiff, long ship, the Great Trireme, the Necro Furnaces, the Necro Furnace Corvette, the Necro Furnace Galleon, Oil Slick Heart, the Kraken-Hearted Bark, the Barnacle-Powered Trade Galleon, the Steam Engine, a light steamer, and then how to acquire an ether ship. So this is so cool. So you can have different kinds of ships, obviously, but you could even see, there's so much flavor in the kinds here. The Necro Furnace, maybe there's a particular galactic civilization that uses Necro Furnaces, right? Maybe there's a particular Viking civilization out there that uses incantations, pirate Vikings, right? Maybe there are some religious figures that make the roaring temples, this sort of divine. I'm thinking of the Necromongers from, oh gosh, not the first Pitch Black, but whatever the second one's called. Yeah, totally do that. These are great, really, really cool. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, obviously, because again, it's 308 pages in PDF form, and because I have two other PDFs to go through, so I'm not going to go through it all. But then you have custom ships, how to make your own custom ships, and that's so cool. The different classes, the jet propulsion systems, how much they might cost, how to twin them, and what that's going to do. Chain star, just all the different kinds of making your own ships here, with how much they're going to cost, and adding things up, and all of that. Different ship sizes, which is great. Breakdown for those of us who aren't so, nautically minded. I couldn't tell you what the difference between a pinnace and a sloop is, but I'm glad that they have the details here. I know the difference between a galleon and a dinghy, generally, but I don't know all the details here. So this is great that to have these generic terms that you can use and apply to lots of different things. I like this too. The first deck upgrade is whatever you want. Anything that makes sense on a ship can be added to that ship. But then here's some ideas of how to do them. That's great. Different armor platings. I love the inscribed bronze. That's so cool. Siege batteries, ammunition, rare upgrades. So you get the point here that this book is all, well, not all, but a ton of stuff for just those tools to develop your ships and your space, your galaxies. And there's some really cool ones out here too. How distance works, how naval maneuver works, how pursuit works, shipboard actions, siege attacks, ramming, boarding actions, attacking and mass combat, all of that. How to fight Leviathans. And that's really, really cool. I'm going to jump ahead here. Now you can see that this is just the preview PDF, and so some, for example, of these are not fully developed. There are infinite destinations for you can generate one to page 206. So you fill this list with references that inspire you. Now, I'm actually not sure if this is supposed to be blank or not. This makes it sound like it's supposed to be blank. So I don't know. But you can generate particular worlds later with page 206. I'm going to go there. Jump to 206. How to generate random systems. This is a page 206 of 208. So here we go. Start by generating a random system. You just roll a handful of dice. D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20. And the D10 and the D12 on this page point to additional tables. All right, so you roll it. The D10 is going to be system type. Is it gravitational, flat, or weird? And the habitability is either ruined, uninhabited, or inhabited. And then you go down. Gravitational systems. You get heliocentric, 1 sun. Heliocentric, 1d6 suns. Stationary planets, 1 sun. Or geocentric, 1 habitable planet. D6 result is suns. Habitable planets, uninhabitable planets. Random obstacles in the world space void. Asteroid fields, comet swarms, firestorms, hungry asteroids, acid droplets. Flat systems. Different kinds of those. A bowl with gravity towards the edges. A ring with top on the interior, able to see across. 7 discs in tiers with a waterfall running down them. A Mobius strip of land flowing like a river about the sun. That's so cool. Weird systems. A huge planet with a moon like a normal planet, and a moon about that planet, all 3 inhabited. A huge planet with a moon like a normal planet, and a moon about that planet. So you got these three planet systems. A single inhabited planet orbiting an equally sized inhabited sun. Ooh. So it must be like a Dyson sphere or something like that with an inhabited sun. Or maybe there's weird star creatures that live on the planet, the sun, or something like that. A candle with the whole world at its peak, the sun slowly melting away the world, life constantly fighting the flow towards the edge as new layers of the world are revealed. So just super weird, D4, D6, weird systems here. That's super cool. Not quite a D66 system. That's so cool, and the different terrains and what they each mean. This reminds me of something from like Stars Without Number. It's actually very similar in that sense, and that would be a great book to pair, by the way, with this, Stars Without Number. You could generate a really cool galaxy either way, but this is another thing quite like that. Causes of the Ruined World's Destruction. That's so cool. So cool. Anyway, as you guys can tell, this is a great book. I'm going to go really quickly to some of the monsters at the end of the book. Here we go. Some ghostly echoes of a ship and their stats there. And you can see the stats of the full echo, deadly echo, shambling echo. And these are ship stat blocks. So you're going to be fighting this. Well, this is the Navy. These are the men in the Navy. But these are the stats for the ship and the fighting stats for it. So you're going to be, again, it's not... Combat is similar to regular combat in terms of the stat blocks being laid out. But the crew as a whole, the players as a whole are going to have to work together on their ship. They're not individually going to be attacking the enemy ship or something like that, right? Really cool. Really, really, really cool. And then pirates. An Ether Mutant Brute. An Ether Mutant Captain. The stat blocks are so simple in Shadowdark. I love it. With maybe an ability, maybe a few abilities, but it's mostly super easy. Recently, I've been going through the Dolmenwood book, and I transferred the entire Dolmenwood monster manual into Shadowdark stat blocks. I transferred it over. It took me a little while. The document's like 78 pages. It's like 30,000 words or something like that. But I have the entire Dolmenwood monster manual. And one of the things I noticed is that the stats for most of the creatures did not have to be transferred very much. They were basically good. But the abilities, a lot of them did have to be modified a little bit. But actually not as much as you might think. There was actually quite a lot of overlap. And it was fairly easy to do. Just took a while. And now I have a monster manual for Dolmenwood, which I'm really, really happy about. A Shadowdark monster manual for Dolmenwood. It's really, really cool. Okay, anyway, this book is awesome. Leviathans, Monsters of the Light. Let's look at one Leviathan, the Astral Kraken. Vast tentacles slam across the deck, splintering wood and tearing steel. Teeth cut from the stuff of stars slice through people as the tentacles lash at the people with the nerve to strike its leathery flesh. The Astral Kraken, named after the legendary sea beast it vaguely resembles, is the most feared predator of the Aetherdark. The Kraken has three parts: its shell, its maw, and its tentacles. The shell is an oblong dome of dense flesh that shields its body. Most suspect the core of the shell is a star crystal, like the Kraken's teeth, but it always decays to an empty cavity by the time attackers can dissect the body. Extending from the shell are the tentacles, tough and strong limbs with crystalline teeth lining the interior. Among the teeth are also occasional eyes with no pattern to how they appear, focusing intently on whatever that tentacle decides to strike. Where the tentacles converge, a gaping maw looms. The teeth ring about a fleshy opening, looking like a lamprey's gnawing mouth, yet again with blinking, darting eyes among them. As Kraken age, their tentacles do not get thicker, they just get longer and more numerous. And then you get tentacles as crew. Young Kraken, adult Kraken, ancient Kraken with attached tentacles and severed tentacles. Because of course severed tentacles fly through space just as evilly. And you can have congealed demulas and all these things. So anyway, I think this is such a cool little document. I shouldn't say little, it's 308 pages, it's huge. It's a cool document. And it's a great Spelljammer adaptation, basically, or setting. But it's really not a setting, it's a sort of toolbox for you to create your own setting. So I highly recommend you guys check this out. Again, it's on Kickstarter, so I'll put the link below to where you can get that. And it's out on Kickstarter today, April 22nd. So again, thank you to the creator, Micah, for sending it over to me. The next is Soulblight. Now, I'm not going to go through this one quite in as much detail. Well, I might do a bit, but it's not on Kickstarter or anything like that today. It's not. It's been out for a while, as far as I know. Great use of public domain art with commentaries. This world that it's developing is very, very weird, and the art matches. It's not a traditional setting. It is really cool, though. I think it's probably vaguely sword and sorcery. At least that's how it strikes me. A lot of the language, a lot of the descriptions of places. this sort of emphasis on the gods and sort of being mortal, coming down to the earth and dying and being reborn and things like that. It sounds vaguely, there's lots of talks of witches, a lot of talk of blasphemy and stuff like that. And so it kind of has this very grand sense. But then again, the world has for example, Zyralax, the far-seeing tyrant, the violator of flesh and mind. She built her laboratories and labyrinths beneath the jungles. She conjured the weak-willed and easily seduced demon princess, Akamana, evil intent manifest, who constructed a cathedral of sin beneath a once pure oasis. So this is the whole setting overview. It's very, very dark, which fits the Shadowdark vibe. Again, look at this great art. It's a very weird and vibrant world that you really feel. Now, a lot of this book is writing. It's 191 pages, and you're reading through a lot of material here. There's a huge world that's being developed and presented. This is not a toolbox so much like Aetherdark was. Aetherdark's a toolbox for you to kind of create your own setting with certain rules and things like that. This is a world. Soulblight is there to give you a particular place that you are going to play in, the Soulblight itself. The longing, the jealous, the idle, the ravenous, the hubris, the seduced, and the resenters. They're the 7 sovereigns. And then basically the Soul Blight is this corruption, this mutation, affliction that affects things in the world, and it's either one of these effects, as far as I can tell. And as the players come into contact with creatures that are afflicted by these blights, they can themselves become afflicted by them. They have to make checks, and there's steps, and it gets worse and worse. And at the end of it, if they fail their final checks, they can become a monster, and they have to immediately fight the party and stuff like that. So that's really cool. Creates a sort of stakes for encountering these things. The Shadowdark are these ancient catacombs, mining shafts, cavernous rifts, sinkholes, dungeons dug too deep below the surface of the world. They all reach and they all potentially connect to the Shadowdark, a realm of danger, darkness, and dread that promises rewards, glory, and adventures to no end for those brave enough to descend and face the many hidden monsters, traps, and arcane abominations that hide in its bowels. Though not every dungeon is a Shadowdark, every realm of the Shadowdark is a dungeon. That's really cool. So there are these huge realms underneath the earth that connect, and that they sort of blend in with the name of the setting, the Shadowdark, right? It's a really cool idea. Plus, that's a great use of I think that's Aeneas and the Sibyl in the Underworld. Great piece of public domain art there. So then you have the cultures of Lotharion, which is the world above, and a description of the kinds of creatures here. They're not traditional, they're not standard, you're not dealing with regular stuff. And that's something to keep in the setting. This is in a weird setting. It's not Western fantasy, it's not medieval world with magic. It is it's its own thing, and that is really, really cool. Great art that brings that sense right to the surface. As I said, it has that kind of punky vibe because there's such a variation of color and image from page to page. You have things like these pictures right side by side, right? Sabine's with Rana's, very different art styles right next to each other. It's a little jarring, but that's part of the intent, I think, of this book, is to have that sort of jarring quality page to page. Very different art styles. They're all cool and unique, interesting in their own right, but it creates this very odd sensation as you're reading through the book, which I think is part of the intent again, and I like that. It's not usually my thing. I'm not usually into that sort of, I like a much more sort of coherent one style. I'm also much more of a fan of using, the pen and ink styles of art rather than full color pages. I think you can do full color really, really well in certain books. And this one is, again, one of those that I think does it really well. Most of this book is the setting. You don't really get as many tables and stat blocks and things like that until later. But you're going through descriptions of the world. And again, many of these things are really, really cool, really, really creepy. The Shadow Dome. And here is actually some stats. These are the first stats that I can, so about 60 pages in, the Sovereign Realms. That's a great piece of art there, both of them. And then you have sort of regions, right? The Craving Gardens. The region is the Lothar Desert, and the nearest town is the Outpost Indigo. You have the Worm's Trough. Its realm is in the upper steppes, and the town is Morrow Rock. So it's a dungeon, sort of, with a brief description of it, but it's more, again, you have an overview of the kind of dungeon it's going to be, rather than a map and a particular set of monsters or a particular set of encounters. There's some mutations, 2d6 mutations happening here, d6 marks, and then the flesh pits have the Dungeon of Madness with the dungeon building blocks in them for the rooms. You can roll on that, and wandering monsters, but that's all that you have. You don't have a full dungeon there. That's a really cool idea. It's one that I've seen elsewhere a handful of times. Arthur Rackham art right there. I love Arthur Rackham. It's funny, you know, having tried going through making my own adventures, I've been looking through a lot of public domain art, and so I see a lot of these pieces in the public domain collections and things like that. The Charred Cathedral, the Throne of Xerxes, the Red Hermit's Peak. So anyway, great use of art in this book. There's a dragon up here, which is always cool. I think that's Dante in the Inferno. Great use of art here. Now there are, here we go, random encounter tables. And this is where you get more of those random things. Cathedra random encounters, Lothar Desert random encounters, Upper Steppes random encounters, Jungles of Sur random encounters, Carbuncle Mountains random encounters. Now, one thing I think might have been a mistake, either it's my particular edition or in the book as a whole, but the Carbuncle Mountain encounters and the Blue Glades random encounters are exactly the same. As you can see, the 2 pages are identical. I don't know if that's intended or not. I would imagine not. But anyway, just noted that. The Bestiarium, here's a whole bunch of extra creatures statted out for shot block. You get the Sovereigns, and then you have the Blighted, the fate of many whose wills were too weak to resist the Blight. And they're different kinds, right? So the Hubris, the Idle, the Jealous, the Loathing, the Longing. These are the corrupted of the Sovereigns here. The Cathedra, or people, I should say, stat blocks from Cathedra. Stat blocks from Shadow Dome, or the Shadow Dome. Stat blocks from the Lothar Desert. So again, you get the idea. Different stat blocks for the different regions divided up. That's pretty cool. I like that. And there's some really good ones here. Really cool creatures. The Worm's Trough. Kasamakua. Kasamuka. There we go. A sand siren of the upper steppes that makes its lair in deep gulches and cavernous fissures, exerting a melodious tune to lure prey towards her preying mandibles. She is acid, an alluring call. The Locust Folk. The blood-craving vampire. The Locust Folk priest. The necrophage vampire. The withered vampire. Or the worm. Really, really cool. I like this a lot. It's very unique. Very unique. You're not going to see a setting like this again. This is not like other settings out there. So Soulblight, I highly recommend you guys check this one out. This is by Lauren David Wegan. And thank you to Lauren David for sending it to me. Really, really appreciate this. It's so flavorful. Even if you don't run this setting, you're going to get so many good ideas just by reading through this book. So I highly recommend you guys check out Soulblight as well. I'll put links below to where you can get it. And then finally, Shadowsun. Now this one I got myself. It's been out there for a while. This is not brand new, but I've had people recommend that I check it out for a while. And I'm glad that I did. I mean, I've actually had this for a while, but I haven't really read through it. It's a full setting with, as you can see, a brief overview of the setting itself, and then tons of character creation stuff, some overviews of different regions in the world of Althea, which is sort of a take on, again, Dark Sun. And then you have new spells, new bestiary, and new treasures. So ultimately, most of this book is character classes, spells, bestiary, and treasures. There's actually very little about the world itself. Maybe, well, as you can see, a handful of rules at the beginning for the Barren Land and for survival rules here, and then a handful of pages, about 33, on the world itself. Most of the 216 pages in this book are player-facing, and some GM-facing things, right? Powers, spells, character stuff, and the bestiary and the treasure. Really cool world map here, and when you buy this, you get it in a couple of forms. One that's not as it doesn't have the black, and it's a little clearer. This is more flavorful. I like this. ancient history of the world, the barren land, using the setting, survival rules, and then character creation stuff. Now, again, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of new classes. It makes sense that you'd want to adapt them for Shadowdark or for Dark Sun, right? You got to kind of have your own classes there. And there's the warrior, the sorcerer, the shaman, and the mentalist, and the explorer, which is a good set for the new Shadowdark. And I think these are done pretty well. Again, you're probably not going to use your standard classes alongside these ones because these are mostly kind of going to be an upgrade. Mostly going to be an upgrade. New take on alignments, sort of different languages and adventuring gear. So it's a sort of an adaptation of the standard Shadowdark stuff for this new book, but also a whole bunch of new equipment. Stuff like the Astrolabe or the Astrolabe. I think it's an Astrolabe, and like a chisel. With their costs, different kinds of locks. That's pretty cool. And new weapons. Again, most of them are the standard, but then a whole bunch of new kinds of armor. And that makes sense because, again, in Dark Sun, metal and metal armor is really, really rare. So you're not probably going to have that sort of thing. Now, it would have been nice to have, maybe a materials table for the weapons too. I think that would have been cool. It would fit. It would feel more like Dark Sun. Maybe have a durability system built in, and that wouldn't be that hard to do. You just use a usage die system, right, where the different materials have a different die associated with them. So, bone has like a D4 usage die, and something like that. So it wouldn't be too hard to build that in, but it would have been nice to see that because I don't know. I get Dark Sun always has this sense of like everything's breaking and you have to find new materials, and finding a bone sword or finding if you find a steel sword, I mean, that's just incredible. But if you find something that's more valuable, like, an obsidian blade, that's really cool. Better than just, sort of a cheap one, a bone one out in the desert, or like a brittle rock one or something like that, or just a club. Although you're not probably going to find much wood. But anyway, you have a breakdown of each of the regions. It's very brief. And then you have the, again, most of the book, if you go down, is just spells and stuff. So I think this is a cool setting, and I'm really glad that people pointed it out to me. I'm glad that I have it. You can draw some of the spells and things like that. It's not really that... I mean, you're going to have to do a lot of work if you're going to want to run a game here. There's no adventure. There's no cities, except for vaguely detailed. There's no... it's a lot of work left to you. Like a lot of the player-facing stuff is already done, the spells and the classes, but the actual world itself is not really. I mean, 30 pages is not that detailed. So, I'm not. I mean, it's good. I'm glad that I have it. But I think if you're going to do a really full, you're going to have to do a lot of work on this setting. Is my point. The classes and spells and stuff, that's sort of an easier adaptation, I think, for most DMs than building a whole world out if you want to play in Dark Sun. On the other hand, some DMs don't want to do that technical stuff. They don't want to do the new classes and psionic powers and all that. That's not as much fun for them. What they do want to do is develop the world and write it out. And here, there's enough inspiration to kind of build off this and do your own thing. And there's some really cool ideas in here too. So if you're on that side of DMing, where you don't like the technical stuff as much, you don't like designing new classes, or you don't really like adapting standard classes, or spells or things like that, and what you really want is just a little bit of a guideline as you're developing your own world, then Shadowsun would be the product for you. I'll put links below to where you can get it. So anyway, Aetherdark, Soulblight, and Shadowsun. 3 very different settings that'll hopefully, tide you over until the Western Reaches comes out. All right, guys, well, I hope this has been interesting to everybody, and I'll see you all in another video.